Hello and welcome to Heartlight Vedic Astrology. In today's talk, I was going to discuss the national birth chart of Australia. Um, excuse me, just so you know, this talk is from a Vedic astrology perspective, or Jyotish as it's known as in Sanskrit. So Jyotish is the ancient astrology of India. Yeah, so let's take a look at what we can find out about Australia here. Yeah, just some announcements and orientation, especially for those who are new to the channel. I'm offering a level 1 introductory Vedic astrology course starting January 14th, 2026. So if you'd like an application, the deadline's in about a week. So we've only got a few days left. If that's interesting to you, you can email heartlightastro@yahoo.com for more info. Auto dubbing is available on this channel in various languages listed here. There are several new ones: Dutch, Polish, and Korean. All of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are in my concepts playlist. They can be found there. Wherever you see a double asterisk in one of my talks, that means there's a teaching video on that subject if you'd like to learn more. Also, my channel is all about playlists. So, like this type of video is in my famous places playlist. So, like other countries I've looked at, like Thailand and Turkey and that sort of thing. So, I'll be filling out as I do more charts. Also, if you'd like to learn astrology by looking at famous birth charts, I have a video titled Birth Chart Archive List 2025, where I list all the famous videos I've analyzed on the channel, including famous people, places, and moments in time. So, some of the newest videos I posted, in case you missed any: planetary transits or Gochar for December 2025, Strika Nakshatra or the Golden Warrior Star, the new moon or Amavasya on 19th December 2025, and then the December solstice 2025 in the next 6 months, so Nanta and Uttarayana. If you're new to all this and want to start learning Vedic astrology or, get more on talks like this, I've listed at the bottom of the slide. These are the introductory foundational videos I would watch first to really set yourself up with a good foundation. Okay, so the astrology of Australia. Um, so you might be wondering, why Australia? There are a few reasons actually why I decided to go in this direction. So one is that actually Federation Day for Australia is January 1st, 1901. So that's New Year's Day, and New Year's Day is happening for us in a couple days here. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing that's important about that day is that there's an exact birth time. Um, Legally, Federation Day happened for Australia, at midnight that day. So, the thing though about it is that one of the things that kept coming up with, learning about the astrology of Australia. Well, that sounds pretty similar. Um, is that there were a lot of different dates and a lot of different times. So it was really hard to get clarity on which date I should use and which time I should use and that sort of thing, which I will get into a little bit more about what that, just the process of trying to figure out the best date and time to look at. I'll get into that a little bit later, but I was just going to mention a few dates that I will be looking at in this talk. So Federation Day is the main one, January 1st, 1901, starting at, midnight that morning. Captain Philip, that's another chart I'm going to look at briefly. Captain Philip hoisted a flag on 26th of January, 1788 in Australia. So this date was important because essentially when Captain Philip landed, he brought the British fleet with him, but he also brought about 1,500 people that established the first European colony in Australia. So other Europeans had visited before, but this was really the establishment of like something more permanent. And the official proclamation of that kind of endeavor of establishing the first community actually happened on 7th of February, 1788. So that's another date that pops up when you start looking for astrology of Australia. And then I didn't find this date, but it seemed sort of important actually from a historical point of view. Actually, what I did, because there were so many dates and times popping up, I was like, I really have to just kind of do my own thing and be objective, I think, as objective as I can as an outsider. Because I was reading all these different things about, well, people don't like this day because it's more an invasion day, and decimated the, native Australians who were there, first Australians who were there, the Aborigines and all this sort of thing, the native tribes. And I totally get all that, and I totally get that that's not, cool or PC anymore or whatever. But just as an astrologer, what I was really looking for was seminal dates, seminal times that really shifted, the identity of the country. And these are, I think, the three that popped up. And again, the one I went for was the Federation Day because there was an exact time. There were a couple of times, several times that were listed for these other two dates. Um, but I will look at them briefly, just because I think they inform the Federation date chart that I'm going to be looking at. Okay, so there was actually a lot to sort through. Actually, I spent a whole day just like going through all that, trying to figure out how to even approach astrology of Australia, which actually was important in me understanding the chart even before I saw the chart. Because with that much confusion and that much sort of redirection and confusion, and me sort of obsessing about like trying to figure out like how do I approach this. I was just like, there must be, most likely, there is either Rahu or Ketu in the lugna of the chart. Excuse me. The reason why is that Rahu and Ketu are the north and south nodes of the moon, and they indicate confusion, illusion, delusion, that sort of thing. And usually, when I have charts that I'm like I can't kind of wrap myself around and can't get a hold of, it's sort of slippery in a way. That's usually the case. And as we will look at the Federation Federation Day chart, that actually turns out to be true in terms of Rahu or Ketu, the nodes of the moon, being associated with the Lugna or rising sign ascendant, because that sets the tone for the whole chart. So anyway, so this third date that I'm going to look at is Captain Cook, who landed in Sydney. All these dates are related to Sydney, Australia. He landed on 29th April 1770. Before I move on. So the Captain Phillip hoisting the flag and establishing the first European colony, that date is still celebrated in Australia. So I think just the fact that that has remained an important date. Now, I know that there's contention about that because of, again, the long, negative outcomes that, and results that happen for the Aboriginal people. And I totally get that. But just in terms of like there being like a definite shift in the identity of a nation, regardless of how it was functioning internally, that date seemed important. Okay. Um, so when Captain Cook, now getting back to Captain Cook, so he came around 29th April 1770, and what he did was he sort of staked a claim in the Australian land for Britain. Okay, because other countries had been there. I think the Dutch and the French and maybe the Spanish as well. But so when Captain Cook landed, he also hoisted a flag, so that was like a big thing, sort of, marking their territory, literally marking their territory. That was the establishment of a British presence in the country. Okay, so it didn't make Australia united, the way the Federation Day did, and it didn't really establish with growing settlements, the way the time of Captain Phillip, but it was still important, and that definitely I understand. We'll look at that chart, and that's a pretty wild chart, so I can understand why people were not happy with that date, and they don't probably want to acknowledge it. But I thought we would just look at it, briefly, so that at least part of the history of Australia is sort of caught, understood through astrology. So the other thing is that there's a whole, which I could not get much information of, but again, there's a whole indigenous perspective on the history of Australia. And they have their own, astrology that they do. But I was looking for any sort of time or date, that was used in indigenous astrology, just to take a look at it, using the tools that I have. And there weren't any specific dates. I don't even know how that was done. It was probably more of a observational type of thing rather than like a recording of dates and times and that sort of thing. So, but there was this notion of like this ongoing creative evolution of consciousness in that paradigm of astrology, which again I tip my hat to and I honor. But again, with the tools that I have, you know, uh, my tools are pretty specific. So unfortunately, that wasn't very helpful. But again, I honor the tradition. All right. So with all that being said, let's take a look at this Federation Day chart. Let's see what we got here. So yeah, this is the chart of Federation Day for Australia. Okay, again, 1st of January, 1901. And we're looking at Sydney, Australia here is the birthplace. Okay. So this is a chart, again, unmarked without my notes, just so, again, if you're an astrology student and you want to kind of look at it on your own and then, compare your notes with mine, you can do that. Okay. So what do we have here? So, first of all, if you're not familiar, this is a North Indian style chart. That's what I use in my work. So just to orient you, the top diamond in the middle, there's an AS there, 24 degrees, 17 minutes. The AS stands for ascendant. So that's ascendant, rising sign, first house. Okay, all different names are the same thing. In Sanskrit, we say the lugna. So you're going to hear me say that over and over again. So that top diamond in the middle, there's a little 6 in the bottom corner. That 6 in the bottom corner refers to the 6th constellation of the zodiac, which is Virgo or Kanya in Sanskrit. So we have a Virgo rising chart here. Okay, Virgo is a dual earth sign. So earth signs are very practical, but dual means that there's like going to be conflict or contradiction or splitting, okay, going on here. And then to get to the other houses, so again, this is the first house at the top. To get to the second house, for example, you go up to the upper left corner. If there's an upside down triangle, there's a little 7 in the bottom corner. That 7 refers to the 7th constellation of the zodiac, which is Libra or Tula in Sanskrit. Okay, and then you go through the other 12 houses. So again, we're looking at some division, of, literally land, something very practical here. Right? And what else is in this lugna? Okay, well, we have Saturn sitting here in the 4th house of land and property and past lineage. Okay, Saturn is a planet representing land itself, very tangible things, history, also delays, obstacles, chronic problems, that sort of thing. And this Saturn is aspecting, you see that arrow pointing from the 4th house to the 1st house. Saturn is casting its light, its energy on the 1st house. So again, we're picking up this energy of land again. Okay, but with chronic problems. Okay. The other thing about this Saturn is you can see it's at 15 degrees, 10 minutes here. It's very close to the sun. The sun's at 17 degrees. It's within a degree of the sun. So what that means is Saturn is so close to the sun you can't see it. So this land that's important and that's part of the new identity that's being formed here. So again, the Lugna ascendant rising sign, this basically sets the tone for the whole chart, both physically, mentally, emotionally, right? Personality and physicality of somebody or something. So this land and, again, structure, Saturn represents structure and history here, is something that's not seen. So this division of land, this conflict of land, has long-term problems that are not seen, meaning that they're not physical problem, like physical, tangible. Like there's no literal line in the sand here. These are all theoretical. These are constructs of the mind, potentially. Okay. So basically, where are we drawing borders? Right? And these borders, like, geopolitical borders, they're usually based on, people fighting about land or accessing land, annexing land, or, selling off land or whatever. But the earth itself has not changed. I mean, the koalas and the kangaroos are still doing their thing. I mean, they're oblivious to all this, right? So this is a mental abstract construct that's part of this division of land. Okay. The other thing that's involved in this lugna here is that K2 is sitting here in the 9th house of authority and government. K2 is a south node of the moon, and it's got this very erratic quality to it. It's like Mars. Mars is a fiery, rebellious planet. K2 is like that, but even more of a unusual twist to it. And this is in the 9th house of authority. And again, we're going through this process of federating Australia into land that's separate from its original government of Britain. Okay, so we have a separatist government here. Okay, now the thing is, the landlord of this ninth house here is Venus, because Taurus, this little two in the left corner here, that refers to the second constellation of the zodiac, which is Taurus. Okay, and Venus is sitting directly opposite in the third house. So Venus is shining its light into the ninth house here, protecting this unusual separatist government. Okay. And also this K2 is in what we call a nakshatra called Kritika. Kritika, I just actually posted a video on that if you want to get in, if you want to get into it deeply, but I like to call Kritika the shining warrior star. Okay. So it's about light, it's about valor, and that, but there's also a fight. There is also this notion of nurturing, a foster mother. So there's sort of this sort of victorious, rebellious, unusual foster mother type energy in government, which is essentially the government of Australia. Okay, that's being formed on this day at this time. Okay, and the thing is, because Venus is aspecting the ninth house here, that means that we get 5-9 aspects of K2, which means K2 is aspecting its energy of this unusual rebelliousness into the Lugna here. So there again, that's what I was talking about, is that it took me a whole day to like sort through different days and times, and I was like, wow, this is getting a little bit nuts, trying to figure out, what time and date to use. And then when I saw this, I was like, well, this makes a lot of sense. Okay. So with Saturn aspecting the Lugna and K2 aspecting the Lugna here, there is this definite like, separationist energy going on here. Okay. Which is essentially what happened. The rising side nakshatra, I don't think I explained nakshatras. Nakshatras are considered to be star astrology in Vedic astrology, and there are 27 nakshatras. Nakshatras are also called lunar mansions. They all have different energies and deities associated with them. So if Ketu, the nakshatra, is a shining warrior, energy in the ninth house of authority and government, at the top here, the rising sign nakshatra is Chitra. Chitra is symbolized by like a gemstone. Okay, so a cut gemstone. So there's something related to preciousness and wealth and that sort of thing. But there's also this notion of like architecture, right? Because of the cut geometric shape of cut gemstones and that sort of thing. So we're looking at architecture of a separation here, separation of land, both tangible, mundane land, because Virgo is a dual earth sign. But then we have Saturn, a combo Saturn aspecting here as well. So there's both physical boundaries that are being created and orchestrated here, as well as like mental, abstract geopolitical boundaries that are being reset. Okay, right at the top. But again, this also creates this like, divisional quality to the gestalt of Australia moving forward from this day. Okay, so, if you don't like this day, you might just think of this as sort of an update chart. You can think of it that way as well, because again, I was reading so many things and people, notable, astrologers in Australia had their preferences as well. And so even they couldn't seem to really come to a consensus on a date and time, which again, to me, was an indication that probably Rahu or Ketu is in the Lugna, and that's what we have here. All right, so let's look at this. So what else do we notice about this chart? Well, probably the big thing is in this fourth house here, we've got 4 planets, Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn, and Sun. Okay, so this is what we call a pravraja yoga. Yoga is a combination. Pravraja means like a life focus. So the focus here is on fourth house. Fourth house matters, which is lineage, past history, also land, property, home. So, they're working things out here, okay, in terms of this. And again, the Saturn especially is aspecting, the Lugna here. So just this fourth house, Jupiter represents law, Mercury represents, ideas, Jupiter and Mercury together represents news, Saturn represents land, Sun represents government. Now you can see Saturn's very close to the Sun here. Um, and so it's combust. I believe Mercury is also combust at this time, and Jupiter was just combust. So you can see, so it was almost like all three of these planets, Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, were all combust at this time. I think Jupiter just got out of combustion like a day or two before this, which essentially they're still like casting a shadow or, energy of that to some degree. Luckily, Jupiter did come back on board, but the other thing is that I've circled within this gaggle of four planets, Jupiter and Mercury. You can see Jupiter and Mercury in the same degree. They're in what we call planetary war, graha yuddha. So there's a lot of fighting, a lot of talking and fighting about this land, with people. Jupiter represents people, friends and neighbors. Mercury represents that. Saturn represents literally um, the land, but also, the kind of working class people, and then the sun, so authority. So you have all these different kind of, contentious, entities involved in this process here. Okay. Also, this planetary war. This means that there's going to be, literally fighting going on. Not only in the fourth house because it's happening in the fourth house, but Jupiter and Mercury own. Look at this. Mercury owns the lugna here because Mercury is the ruling planet of the lugnatia for this whole chart here. Okay. So, Saturn and Ketu, that's a lot of, well, they're both malefic energies here, on the Lugna. And Mercury is in war here. I believe Mercury's also combust. Do I have it in here? Let me just double check Mercury. Yeah, combust Mercury. Yeah. So again, a lot of this fighting and internal stuff going on is something that you can't see with your eyes. And actually, because of this, because Virgo is a dual earth sign and Saturn is on it, Ketu's on it, there's a separation thing going on here. Saturn is combust and it's in the fourth house of land and property. I was actually wondering if there was literally an earthquake, like tectonic plate seismic shift going on. And actually, what I looked up is that there was an earthquake that happened the 10th of January, so 10 days after this in Perth, near Perth. And there were a couple of other earthquakes that happened that year. One was a fairly big one called the Cheviot earthquake that happened in New Zealand. Now, what's interesting is that at this time, New Zealand famously chose not to join Australia, and they separated this time. So that also in itself was, people are starting to choose. Entities are starting to choose. Like, at that time, New Zealand and Australia could have joined up and been one country, but there was again all the separationist energy right at the top. That's both literal land, but also figurative in terms of boundaries and stuff like that. Okay. So what do we see here? Government sorting and order. That's the other thing about Virgo. Virgo is all about putting things in order. So there's a lot of chaos going on here, and it's about trying to rectify, put this in some sort of, feasible ordered system here. Drawing lines, not only in the sand, but on the maps. The other thing about this that's, tough, okay, so already we've got, planetary war going on with the Lugnatia, the ruling planet for the chart. We've got these two malefics on the Lugna here. The other thing is that Jupiter and Mercury, they're in the first few degrees of Sagittarius, okay? The first few degrees of Sagittarius, it's called this is a Gandanta point, okay? So anytime you cross a sign like Jupiter currently in the sign, in this chart, currently in the sign of Sagittarius, okay. This means it's Jupiter and Mercury, relatively speaking, just crossed over from Scorpio, the house before it. Okay, every time you cross a sign, that's considered unstable because they have different elements associated with them. There are 12 different, what we call Sunday points or joint points in a chart every time you cross a sign. But 3 of the 12 points are Gandanta points where they're dually unstable because you're not only crossing signs, but you're crossing nakshatras or lunar mansions. Okay. So Jupiter and Mercury, not only are they in war, and Mercury's combust, but again, they both recently crossed a Gandanta, which made them very unstable. So that brings even more instability to the top of the chart in this whole process. So luckily, they got anything done, accomplished, and they did, but there was a lot of pushback, from various groups. The other thing about the nakshatra that Jupiter and Mercury are in, they're in a nakshatra called Mula. Mula is symbolized by a bunch of roots tied together. So that also, again, brings us back to this idea of like land, literally. Roots are below the ground and things are below the ground. And, the fourth house represents things that are below the ground. So again, I was like, there must have been some earthquake. And again, there was. But Jupiter, Mula Nakshatra is also the deity associated with Mula is Nriti, which is a form of Kali, the goddess of death and destruction. Okay. So this is like, you know, you could, on the more positive side, see this as planting seeds, and luckily Jupiter is in its own sign. So it will bring some positive transformation of planting seeds here. Okay. Luckily Jupiter's here, and again, it just came back online from being combust. Otherwise, it would be, like a pretty hot mess, frankly. Okay. With Jupiter and Mercury, this is all about planting seeds of new ideas, new news, that sort of thing, thoughts, decisions, that sort of thing that are legal. Okay. But Mula, again, there's still this energy of potential death and destruction because whenever you plant a seed, it all sounds sort of romantic in a way. You plant the seeds and you water it a little bit in the sunshine, and the seeds sprout up above the ground, and you get your rose bush or whatever. But that's a very tough, transformative time. The seed has to crack open and burst, and then feed itself to like struggle through the soil and hopefully make it to the top. And most seeds don't make it that far. And then hopefully once they get to the top, the conditions of sun and soil and shade and water and all that, is the right mix for that particular seed. But, it's all a very precarious situation. Okay. So again, I would also, again, note here, okay, already we've got 4 planets all together. Okay. And we've got planets in Mula. Okay. And we've got 5-9 aspects of Ketu or Rahu. Okay. So remember this because going forward, as I'll keep going through this chart in detail. But again, when I look at the other dates, you'll start to see that there's a commonality in all the different dates, even though they seem unrelated and I know they're contested or whatever. But that also means that, again, if we keep seeing the same formations in these different dates, that's a pretty deep, part of the gestalt of Australia. From a Vedic astrology perspective, we would say we would call it drid karma or fixed karma. Um, Yeah, so again, there's some deep, deep seeds here, So, yeah, so again, this Mula with Jupiter and Mercury also represent words, thoughts, actions. So there's some heavy duty stuff going on here. Again, luckily Jupiter's in its own sign, so that should help. But Mula is still Mula. There still can be like, death, and destruction and endings of things related to that. Okay. Because of that transformational period. And there were, right? Like New Zealand separated from New Zealand, separated from Britain, just as a couple of obvious examples. So let's see. Let me just see if I covered everything. So the other thing, yeah, so this one of the last lines here. So the Lugnatia again is Mercury, which is combust and at war in Mula. So that's a really tough, start, for Australia here on Federation Day. The other thing is Jupiter being a Mula, Jupiter is the ruler of the 7th house of partnerships. So with Jupiter being in Mula, in war, this is also about sort of theoretical pruning or trimming of old partnerships. And I think, again, New Zealand fits that bill as well as Britain as well. Okay. So, yeah, so that's just a start here with Federation Day, but we'll keep looking at the other houses. Okay, so let's move on from the first house and move on to the next few houses and see what we see here. So the second house, the lord of the second house is Venus, which is Bhavam, meaning the second lord has gone 2 houses away. So this means that the second house represents communication, also inner circle and assets. Okay, so I would see here that there's a lot of diplomatic talks going on here. Okay, and also assets being ascertained. Venus happens to be in a nakshatra called Jesta, which is all about protection. So there are people protecting their interest here. Okay, and the moon is aspecting the second house. So the moon represents the public, but also the intuitive, emotional mind. So this process was definitely emotional in nature. And also, again, it's a whole, nation was involved on some level, whether actively or passively, right? So, yeah, so with ambition, many public diplomatic talks to preserve inner circle assets, that sort of thing. So the other thing is, I think the inner circle was all about also, neighbors and stuff like that, because what happened was I think there were six or seven, I don't know if they called them territories or states, and Australia, and basically on this day they all became one. So, and the thing is, all this four planets in the fourth house here, the legal processing and, that was going on here and shifting, and um, each state or each territory had its own way of doing things. So it's sort of like, how do we get everybody on the same page, on board with the same, ambition moving forward, I guess, some sort of a compromise or agreement, So the third house here, the Lord is a Mars. Okay, the third house represents neighbors. It also represents siblings. So Mars also is a planet representing siblings, but potentially enemies as well. Mars is in a nakshatra called Purva Falguni, which is all about like a symbol of that is a marital bed or hammock. Purva Falguni is all about like the finer things of life and that sort of thing. Mars can also represent land, so this might be, land, precious land that's enjoyed. And the thing is, the Lord of the fourth house, or sorry, the third house here, has gone to the 12th house of losses and expenditures. So there is some loss of neighbors. There is some loss of potentially enemies as well. There is some loss of land that's been enjoyed. And everything's shifting and shaking here. Okay. Um, and Venus is there. Venus is in Jason, the protective energy, and Rahu's there. So Rahu again is a north node of the moon. So there's some ambition here, and Rahu's in Anurata. So Anurata is all about victory, but through forming an alliance. So this is again is like a very ambitious drive to form some alliance with different neighbors. Again, this could be, at the level of territories. It could be at the level of local communities. I'm sure this had various levels of organization here. To form an alliance to basically get rid of problems. You know, um, and Mars can also represent like CEO or leadership. So this could be like losses due to leadership overseas who are just sort of profiting and enjoying the land, but like at what expense to the people who actually live there. So this is again like separating from, I guess in my mind, it's sort of like, Britain, who's sort of sitting back and far away, and but still, whatever, I'm assuming taxes or whatever they derive from the Australian territories at that time. It's like, okay, well, let's do our own thing and, govern ourselves and, also be responsible for ourselves, but also profit, from our own living. So then the fifth house here, I already talked about the fourth house in the last slide, but the fifth house here, so this is again, the fourth house is all this like sorting through the past, sorting through laws, arguing government, different levels here, of bureaucracy and government and, people. And, at least again, Jupiter is potentially holding this all together, but just barely because it's again in war with Mercury. Okay. And Jupiter is considered to be the great benefic about diplomacy and fairness and justice and law and finance as well. So that's all on the table. The fifth lord here is Saturn, which again is combust, and it's also aspected by K2. Okay, so this is interesting because the fifth house relates to, children. It also relates to creativity and it relates to romance and that sort of thing. So this is sort of like, what do I say? The Lord of the fifth house going 12 houses away. You can see that there are going to be problems with children moving forward. Okay, as a, again, national entity here. Okay, the Lord of the fifth house is combust. That's not great. Okay, it's gone 12 houses away, indicates losses. K2 is aspecting here. There's going to be disruptions. Okay, so I don't know at the time, but I didn't. Did I look for it? No, I don't think I looked for it. But I'm guessing it was hard at this time. There were some hardships going on with kids. I'll look into it and see if I can find something specifically. But what this means moving forward is that there's going to be problems with children. Okay. Um, and let's see. K2 again. There's going to be this public victory, but like separation and fighting and nurturing children. So I think what they mean by children here are like future citizens. So it could literally be children, like people under the age of 18. But I think it also means like the future citizens, future generations. Um, but again, this fifth house of children slash citizens, if you want to think about it that way, they're like embroiled in this, mess of, um, sorting through past losses here. Okay. If we flip this chart so it oriented to the fifth house at the top, what would that look like? Well, the Lugnatia would be Saturn. It's combust. It's got a natural malefic on it. Okay. And that malefic is gone to the 12th house of losses from the fifth. And then also, in addition to that, the Karaka, the Graha Karaka, the planet symbolizing children, is in war, is in Mula, and again, is 12 houses away from the fifth house of children. So you can see that there are going to be problems with children over time. Um, so again, I don't know if there was a population issue. Actually, I think there were because I think a lot of people died at that time. I'll have to check on that. But also, again, there's going to be issues with children. And actually, in the news, for example, one of the things that's been in the news about Australia is that Australia was the first country, I think, to pass a banning of social media for children under the age of 16. And what's interesting is that K2 can represent things like technology. Again, this is 1901, that predates like the internet, but this could be, protecting, innocent, the loss of, so how do we say this? Protecting the losses of children through technology. So like an internet, social media ban. You can see it here actually in this chart. All right, so what else do we got here? Well, okay, so I just did look up, issues with children in Australia in 1901, and I was like, oh my God, there we go. So the biggest problem, a biggest situation was that there was forced removal of Aboriginal children from their families and forced assimilation practices. So yeah, I mean this K2 again, this K2 aspect in the fifth house, and then the Lord of the fifth house going to the 12th from the fifth. I mean that's a lot of, again, the Saturn K2, basically the Saturn K2 combinations at the top of the chart is also in the fifth house of children. There were also like epidemic diseases going on there. There was poverty going on. Also, I guess the government policy at that time, government stepping in for children, it was, I guess, focused more on kids who were neglected rather than kids who were abused. So, yeah, apparently this Federation Day time was not a great one for children or the citizens. Again, you could see it literally as the kids, which it clearly was, and then generations moving forward. Yeah. Okay, so next houses. So the sixth house here, sixth house lord was is also the Kamba Saturn. Saturn's in Purvashada nakshatra. This is a sorting energy. It's aspected by its which aspects its own house of or sign of Aquarius in the sixth house here. And Mars is here, again, aspecting here. So we got Saturn and Mars in the sixth house. Sixth house represents, routines, daily routines. It represents acute issues, problems, accidents, injuries, enemies as well. So Saturn and Mars, those are two natural malefics, and they're in the sixth house here. So, and Mars represents enemies. So, and Saturn's combust. So, this is like, clearly they're trying. And when you get Saturn and Mars together, it's like an engineering type energy. So Saturn and Mars, it's almost like this, it almost reminds me of this Chitra energy that we started up at the top in terms of architecture. It's a little bit more manufactured, but there's some sort of manufacturing or organization, engineering of routine to deal with long-standing problems, especially ideological, because Aquarius is, an air sign here. So this is trying to again get all these folks, and territories on the same page. Now, again, the background of Australia. I mean, this when was it Captain Phillips showed up, and was it 1788? Right? Is not the date. He brought 1,500 people to start colonizing. But the thing is, those people were essentially convicts, and they had thought about Britain had thought about taking them to other places in the world, like I think Africa and that sort of thing. And I guess Britain was in the had that policy of taking convicts, and I guess that might I'm in the United States. I mean, that explains kind of our history as well. I mean, we're kind of a wily coyote type of nation, in many ways. So if you're seeding a country with people who are, how would you say, like sort of antisocial or doing things in a, you know, nonconformist, let's say that, I guess that's the nice way to say it, nonconformist way, um, one, they're all bringing their karma with them individually, but then that's the seed that's being planted, for the new nation. So, yeah, that might be why, again, like, this is just 1901. This is, I'll show you the other dates that are before this one. And, they're more intense. I mean, it kind of gets more intense as you go back in history. So, but again, there's some similar features, that's interesting for an astrologer to look at. So, the sixth house, again, all this stuff's a developing ideological infrastructure to end these troubles, Uh, the seventh house here, the Lord is again is Jupiter that's at war with Mercury and Mula, aspected by Mars, and it's also aspected by Rahu. So not only do we have K2 at the top, okay, bringing this illusion, delusion, confusion energy, but Rahu is also aspecting 5 and 9 houses away. That means you have Rahu or K2 in 6 out of 12 houses. In this chart, half the chart has this Rahu K2 energy. Was this is like illusion, delusion, confusion, strange, unusual, unexpected, and again, sometimes that's really great. You'll get things that are very unusual and unique, and but sometimes you'll get some really strange things. Like, it's kind of funny. I was thinking about that. I put the pictures, the photos of the animals, the koala and the kangaroo, the joey in the pouch. And I was like, actually, when you think about it, they're also Rahu Ketu animals. They're kind of strange, unusual, unique to Australia. And so that can be the positive side of Rahu Ketu. But then when you have Rahu and Ketu all over a chart, it can bring a lot of illusion, delusion, confusion. And again, depending on what nakshatras they're in and the condition of these. Oh, let me see, actually. Um, Yeah, so K2 is actually debilitated in Taurus here, and Rahu's exalted. So actually, this K2 is even more compromised because it's debilitated. I didn't think about that before. Yeah, so this is like kind of the equivalent of the Wild Wild West of the United States. This is a you know there's especially with Saturn and K2 in the top, it's going to be like don't tell me what to do. I'll sort out my own problems type of, I'm guessing, mentality for Australia. I've never been, but um yeah. So anyway. But Mars and Rahu, there's going to be like this unusual ambition to drive things forward and to sort through relationships. Again, Britain got cut out, New Zealand bowed out, I guess. But it's going to be a very emotional issue here, and also an overseas issue because Pisces is here. Pisces represents things that are like overseas between two different large bodies of water. So that's what happened. Then the eighth house here, the eighth house lord is Mars, which has gone to the 12th house. And the eighth, that's actually maybe not so bad. The eighth house is related to deep chronic problems. So the Lord, and also, again, in a Virgo chart, Mars is considered to be a pure temporal malefic because it owns two negative houses, the third house and the eighth house. So luckily, Mars has gone to another negative house, which is sort of like sequestering it, bringing its negative energy to another negative house, which almost kind of forms a positive in a way. Okay. So this is like the end of all these chronic, potentially end of all these chronic public issues, but also deep psychology about birthing a new public identity as a one nation as opposed to, being territory based. Then the ninth house here, the ninth house lord is Venus. It aspects its own house. So even though K2 is debilitated, um, there's some support here and protection here just because Venus is aspecting its own sign and it's in the nakshatra of Jesta, which is about protection. The symbol of Jesta is a talisman. So protecting this fighting, nurturing, unusual separatist government, you know, um, which was the new, kind of individual or separatist government of Australia. Then the last few houses here, 10th, 11th, 12th house. The 10th house lord, we have a combust war, Mercury and Mula. Okay, at least Mercury is aspecting its own sign. That'll bring some protection. But then you've got, Jupiter, Saturn, and Sun on this too. So again, it's Gemini is a dual air sign. So this is sorting through all these ideas and thoughts and words and everything, this contentious energy. This is not an easy, like, unanimous decision by any means. Let's put it that way. And this is like negotiating the end of division of ideas. So basically, the end of division of ideas is like unity. Like, let's try to find some sort of compromise here. Okay. Then the 11th house here, the 11th house lord is Moon, which has gone to the 8th house of, again, deep chronic problems. And the 11th house represents income, but also represents clubs, groups, societies, that sort of thing. And you do have Rahu aspecting here. So this is ambition to unify groups and developing a deep new public mindset. But again, this might also be related to this idea of, and it would be a little bit more, yeah. So there's this ambition to unite all these different groups to develop a new mindset. And Moon is in a nakshatra called Bharani, which I have a video on that. Bharani is symbolized by a womb. So again, there's literally birthing a new group or configuration of a group and also a new identity. And then the 12th house here, kind of a new mindset. So it's like putting into public's mind, like, okay, we're this new big, unified country now, okay? Um, Now, the 12th house lord is Sun, which is in Purvashada as well. So Purvashada is all about sorting things out. And it's Leo is in the 12th house here. So this is a high level government, in remote places. So I think this is referring to Britain here. Yeah. And Mars is there again, like a CEO type energy. So leadership. But, again, military leadership potentially, if not like, um, dealing with the details, not just like a symbol overseas that, like I think, different times there have been like pictures of the queen or the king and people kind of honor those or whatever. But there's actually a overseas government that was, involved in the details of the country. Um, so sorting through that, again, it's sort of like rebelling against this high level leadership and losses to that leadership overseas. Okay, so this is a Federation Day chart, and again, I'm going to go through I call it the Captain Philip chart and the Captain Cook chart, just so you can see. Oh, wait, I have one thing before I get to those, though. I was going to show you another reason why I chose the Australia to talk about now, of all times, is because of this four planets in Sagittarius, because it's very similar to the current sky pattern. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so this chart is a picture of the current sky pattern, and I've oriented so that we have Virgo at the top, so we can compare this chart to the Federation Day chart. This chart is from 28th December 2025 when I was doing the analysis. Again, I oriented to Virgo so we could take a look. So this is important. So as you look, first off, look, we've got the Pravraja Yoga again, 4 planets in the 4th house here. And we have Jupiter aspecting there. And we have Ketu aspecting there. Jupiter's aspecting from the 10th house. Ketu's aspecting from the 12th house. And we have Saturn aspecting from the 7th house here. So basically, there's the energy of 7 different planets in the 4th house here of land, of home, of lineage, of things that are underground. And you can see Mercury literally, at the time, it's at 0 degrees, just past this Gandanta point, moving from Scorpio into Sagittarius. So Mercury has returned to its Mula position, the deep roots, um, what's interesting too, these 3 other planets, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, they're all combust because they're close to the sun. So kind of like that Mercury and Saturn that were combust. And you do have Saturn here because it's the energy of Saturn here because it's aspect, and you do have the energy of Jupiter here. But then in addition, you have K2, Venus, and Mars. So the thing though is that this is going to be very explosive energy. I've talked about this like in my December transit chart because you have Sun and Mars, 2 fire planets in Jupiter, which is a dual fire sign, and you also have K2 in this mix. I mean, this is like kerosene on a fire. Okay? And then Mercury and Venus are in Mula. And Sun, you can see it's 13 degrees, 22 minutes. Just got out of Mula. Mars just got out of Mula a few days before this. So we have all these planets like, braiding through Mula in this part of the sky. So, basically the current sky pattern in a lot of ways is recreating the Federation Day chart for Australia. Yeah, and so let's see. You also have K2 in the 12th house here. K2, like I mentioned, is like kind of like Mars. So, we had Mars in the Federation Day chart in the 12th house, but there's even more erratic, unusual energy here. The other thing we have going on is that there's a parivartana exchange of houses between Mercury and Jupiter. So, Mercury, it's not going to change too much for Mercury because Mercury's still on the 4-10 axis here. But what that means is Jupiter is going to be on half the chart because Jupiter, from its position in the 10th house, is already aspecting the 2nd and 6th houses. So all the air signs. So there's a lot of ideas going on here related to justice. And then because of the parivartana, you can think of Jupiter being back in the 4th house. Jupiter is going to be aspecting all the fire signs. There's going to be a lot of action. So there's going to be a lot of, again, similar to the time of Federation, there's going to be a lot of discussion. There's going to be a lot of fighting. There's going to be a lot of debating and trying to get some sort of consensus about law. Okay. And that's why, Australia has been in the international news quite a bit recently. And for, some unusual reasons, but also unfortunately some fairly tragic reasons as well. But again, we, like I mentioned, you're going to keep seeing this 4 planet pileup in all the charts we look at, even the ones that predate the Federation time and the current sky pattern, and then K2 and Rahu usually all over the chart. Okay. So one of the recent events for Australia, unfortunately, was there was a shooting on Hanukkah celebration, public Hanukkah celebration at Bondi Beach in Sydney. That happened 14 December 2025, 18:47 p.m. If you want to look at that chart, but just to give you the brief, I'm not surprised that all this energy in the 4th house is when this tipping point happened. Okay. Because at that point, on the 14th of December, Mars, you can see Mars is the furthest along here at 16 degrees. So Mars had recently crossed into Sagittarius, crossed that Gandanta dually unstable point, and it was in Mula. Okay, so Mars is explosive, fiery, violent energy in Mula. Again, and the deity associated with that is death. Okay, um, and so it was there, sort of, you know, by itself, and by itself, I think it was okay. It was probably like a little rumbling going on here. But then on the 14th of December, Sun was basically starting to cross, and across that day or very soon after that day, from Scorpio into Sagittarius, and also joined Mars in that Mula energy. So we had two fire planets in Mula, okay, in a dual fire sign, okay? And the thing is, when Sun crossed into a Sagittarius, it activated the 5-9 aspects of K2. So basically, on the 14th of December, with this tragic shooting, you had the energy of Sun, Mars, and K2 in a dual fire sign, uh, in the fourth house of underground. So this is like, this sort of like eruption energy, explosive energy that happened. And Mars again can be violent, and K2 can be, strange, unusual. And the thing is, Jupiter was in Gemini as it is now. And the thing is as bad as it was, Jupiter actually protected the situation. It could have been a lot worse than it was, and I know it was bad enough, and I know Australia is still, feeling the pain from this. So I don't mean to harp on this too much, but I'm just again explaining the astrology here. The other thing is that Jupiter being here, this also relates to again spirituality. So again, this is a Hanukkah, celebration going on here. So anyway, yeah. So, but you can see that like what this all activated is now there's this like fast forward pushing through of gun laws and anti-protest laws and all these sorts of laws that are getting pushed through, in an explosive, probably uncontrolled way, um, similar to probably what was experienced during this Federation chart time. Okay. Um, And you can see there's pushback. So again, one of the news headlines was Australian to fast track new gun protest laws after Bondi shooting draws criticism. So again, that's similar, similar to the energy of the Federation chart. Also in the news, I mentioned quickly, Australia bans most social media for kids under 16. That came into effect at midnight, 10th of December 2025. So, and the rising sign or lugna at that time was Leo. So that's this K2 right at the top. So if you spin this chart a little bit and you make this 12th house the first house, then all of a sudden you have K2 at the top, which again is technology, which is what I mentioned before. K2 is in the 9th house in the Federation chart, but it's aspecting the 5th house of children. So, yeah. So yeah, pretty wild stuff. And what happened? So, and the Lugna nakshatras and Purva Falguni, so enjoyment. Okay, so this is like internet enjoyment, technology enjoyment, which is most of social media stuff. I mean, it's not like necessary for survival in the world, right? And the other thing is Sun at that time was back in Scorpio, and Sun was in Jesta position. So Sun represents government authority, high level authority, and it's in Jesta, this protection. So this is like government protection of internet enjoyment, you know. So yeah. The other thing about this, these events in recent times for Australia, the Dasha period, so the Dasha period is a planetary period. These are the planets that are considered to be more active or influential during a particular time. So from 19th of September to 25th of December, so Christmas Day, planets that were being run were Venus, Saturn, and Moon. Venus and Moon are the two emotional planets. And Saturn is chronic problems, anxiety, doubt, fear, skepticism, depression, anxiety. This is a lot of, bad mixed emotions here going on, from this time period when all this was going down. Okay. And the other thing is that Venus at this time is combust, and Venus is all about luxury items and finer things of life and fun and enjoyment and romance and also diplomacy. Um, and compassion and that sort of thing. And at the time of all of this, Venus was combust, meaning you can't see those Venusian type things, soft and fluffy and unicorns and sunshine, So, and we're running Venus. So we're running, combust Venus here, so it's rough times, I mentioned before, like, in the last few years in the United States, at least, when Venus was combust, a few things happened. Black Lives Matter. There was a whole summer of that, which in and of itself, I mean, I'm totally on board with. But the problem is it turned really violent and destructive because people were like, looting shops and burning cars. And I don't know exactly how much actual good came of it, but people were, pissed off and demonstrating it. I mean, they were, there was no like social filter, and that's a Venus combust. And then another time that flared up was it a year or two ago? Venus and Jupiter were both combos, the two benefics, and that's when all those university protests, went kind of nuts. And university kids were protesting, affairs in the Middle East, and they were. But again, it went haywire. Like it wasn't. They were just peacefully protesting and taking things to higher. They were vandalizing property and doing sit-ins and starvation. Fasting and stuff, all this stuff that was like very dramatic, but in the end, um, I don't know how much it actually did. I think it mostly got them expelled. I don't know that actually much good came of it, but who knows, but it was all in the news. And again, I'm just like, showing, or just giving you examples of times when Venus goes combust. We lose that diplomacy, we lose the social grace, we lose the, niceties, and things that get out of hand. So, yeah, so you can see, if you know the Federation chart, and you assume you use that, not assume, but use that as a birth chart, or at least a recent birth chart for Australia, and then you know the current sky pattern, you also know why some of these things are going down for the country. Okay. So now I'm going to get into, just briefly, not as deep as this, but get into the charts for the landing of Captain Phillip and then Captain Cook, and we can just see what we see there. Okay. So this is the landing of Captain Phillip, who again brings the first settlement of Europeans, and he also hoisted a flag on this day. This is based on the date of 26 January 1788, Sydney, Australia. I don't have a birth time here. So what I did was, there were a bunch of different times, and I was like, I have no idea what the actual thing was. So um, I just turned this into a sun chart. You can potentially use a moon chart, but you can see moon is literally crossing, Leo and Virgo. So it's like, moon chart wouldn't be very viable. With the sun chart here, we can take a look at just to get a general vibe for the day. But you can see the sun, and again, this is like the sole also government authority is in Capricorn, which is a movable earth sign. So there's a lot of practical development going on here, which was literally like bringing, people over, setting up a new, town or, whatever they were going to do. We do have a combust Mercury here. And Uttarashada, Mercury can represent words, and Uttarashada is like a sun victory. So this is like, the proclamation and the hoisting of the flag, it's like the communication of like, yay, we made it, it's a victory speech. And then sun is here in Shravana. Shravana relates to history and like oral traditions and stuff like this. So this is a history making moment, of a victory speech of some kind. And also we have Mars aspecting here. Okay, from the sixth house. So we have Sun, Mars, and Mercury. Does that sound familiar? And we have Jupiter aspecting from the fifth house. So it doesn't look like it. It looks like in the top we only have Mercury and Sun, but actually we have the energy of 4 planets. So again, almost like a pravraja yoga right at the top. Mercury, Sun, Jupiter, Mars. Mercury and Jupiter news, Mercury, Jupiter words, Mercury and Jupiter law. Especially when you get Jupiter and Mars together, that's law. And then Sun and Mars, the 2 leadership planets. So this is all about, um, words and, setting up the law. So basically, was responsible for setting up the first legal system in Australia, really, as he brought the settlement, developed, started the seeded this, you know, uh, settlement here. Okay. So, and let's see. So Mercury's in Uttarashada, that's a Saturn victory. Sun is in Shravana, that's oral history. Mars is in Ardra, there's like some sadness here, storminess. And look, Mars is with K2 again. Okay, that's something that keeps coming up in all these charts. Mars and K2 together, explosive energy. So we saw it in the Federation chart, we saw it in the current sky pattern chart, and now we're seeing it again in this, I call it the Captain Phillip chart. But this was the origin of Australia Day, which is still commemorated in Australia. I think some people, contest this because, again, of all the negative developments that happened with the native Australians who were there, before the Europeans showed up and ruined everything, So, but again, in terms of objectively, for better or worse, this was still an important developmental moment for the country, um, or developing any kind of country, So, and then we have a Bhavat Bhavam. Oh, see, and look, Bhavat Bhavam, Karkabhavanasha Jupiter. So look, we have a Karkabhavanasha, in this case, is Jupiter in the fifth house. So again, the fifth house represents children. Jupiter represents children. This is going to show problems with children, kind of like the Federation chart, but in a different way. Okay, and Jupiter's Bhavat Bhavam because the third house Lord, Jupiter's the third house Lord, and it's gone 3 houses away. So this is going to be one, nonverbal communication or one publication after another, like one law after another. I mean, he started from scratch and like everything. He just laws about this and laws about that and laws about whatever. He had to build the whole legal system basically. And Jupiter's in Mrigashirsha, which is like a seeking, searching type of energy. So, he had to make it up as he went along, in terms of what legal things, are prioritized and that sort of thing. So, victory of a sudden leader, news, history making. The Lugnatia ruling planet for the chart is Saturn. So, basically, that also means Saturn, it's not in the Lugna, it's not aspecting the Lugna, but it rules the Lugna. So, we've got Saturn in the Lugna again, like the Federation chart. The energy of Saturn is related to the Lugna. And Saturn's very strong. It's Swa. It's in its own house in the second house here. The second house is related to inner circle and assets. And Saturn will bring some protection. And again, this is Aquarius here, so there's like ideological protection. But you can see Saturn and Venus just got out of war. They're almost on the same degree. So these are unstable. So there's another war. Okay. So again, Venus, Venus is, unstable again. It's Jupiter or Venus, and these are the two great benefics. Okay. The other thing is Saturn and Venus are in Shatabisha. Shatabisha translates as 100 healers. So there's difficulties here. And there was a food problem. There was people died of starvation. So again, the second house relates to food. And Saturn, being so strong, this could be like a short food shortage, like a famine. Also, people getting sick. And people getting sick. But there's some tenacity here. So, the people who survived, um, I know we're still seeding the new nation. And then Venus, again, being in war with Saturn, again, it's not quite like a Venus combust, but again, Venus is being quite compromised here. Again, the social grace plan, that sort of thing. And Saturn is clearly dominating Venus. Okay. So what is this? Much practical action dealing with ideologically difficult people. So this is gonna be difficult people here. I mean, we're seeding this new nation with convicts, and again, there's a reason why they were shipped across across the other side of the world. And the journey was not pleasant. And then they're showing up in this new place, and then they've got at least with Captain Phillip, I think there was some notion of trying to get along peacefully, coexist with the native Australians at that time. Much different than Captain Cook. Captain Cook, we'll see his chart. I mean, that's like a whole different story, but I think at least there was some attempt to, peacefully coexist. Um, yeah, but yeah, but there's still some, I would say, some problems with, a lack of diplomacy here. This is pretty much because it was basically, I don't know if it was him and his crew or his a few administrators, but um, since they were convicts, it was a penal colony. I don't know how much rights or laws or, rights the first inhabitants, first settlers had there, you know. Yeah. So the thing about this, even though Venus and Saturn are clearly in trouble here, there is tenacity here. So there were some people who the settlement did persist. The settlement did endure despite these hard times, and it's sort of like survival of the fittest type of energy here. Much legal publishing. So then I have groups displaced unusual enemies. So if we look at the fourth house, Saturn is aspecting the fourth house where it's debilitated. And the fourth house is again land. It's also lineage. So again, there's a, background of trouble and destruction here. Okay. And then the sixth house, we've got this Mars K2 explosive energy, and this is enemies. And Mars literally is a planet representing enemy. And K2's there, this is unusual. So there's a lot of unusual enemies. And I mean, again, I think this could be, the native Australians. This could be who is this? This is groups of people because Mars is the lord of the eighth house. So this is like groups of people who, are down and out and, um, not the probably, again, I don't mean to be judgmental. I'm just saying that, it's like people who are probably the most high-minded, let's put it that way. And again, maybe a lot of people at that time were doing things just to survive. Who knows what the stories were, but still they were sort of acting in antisocial ways, maybe just trying to survive. But, this is the group of people here, you know, and so there were clearly, and Mars and K2 together can represent disease, which there was, like infections and unusual infections, which I'm sure they caught all kinds of new bugs when they moved to this new territory that they had no immunity to. And then they also brought, diseases as well. So it works both ways. And, again, so trouble with kids again, that keeps popping up. Venus is compromised. Mars and K2, all planets like kind of, you know, focused on one house. And then in addition, so again, Mula, we have planets in Mula. This time we have Rahu and Mula in the 12th house. So 12th house again, losses and expenditures. Rahu is ambition, overseas, potentially also unusual ambition, and Rahu is in Mula. So this is like unusual ambition, planting seeds, unusual seeds over in remote places and that sort of thing, but also losses due to strange diseases and death and that sort of thing as well. So, again, this is sort of potentially the chart to look at for Australia. And then the last one we have, this is the sun chart or Surya Lugna for Captain Cook landing. And again, this is like the first claim for Britain and the land that is currently Australia. The date here is 29th of April, 1770. Again, there were a bunch of different birth times, so I just did a sun chart. And you can see again, moon is basically crossing a line here as well. So moon is half the day was basically in Taurus and the other half in Gemini. So that's moon chart, for this day was not really feasible. But what do we have here? Well, we have Mercury, Sun, and Venus in the top, aspected by Saturn and Jupiter. So basically 5 planets at the top here. Um, the difference though is I think the tone. So Mercury and Venus are both combos. So we got another combos Venus. So again, lack of diplomacy, lack of compassion, right? And the Lord of all this, this is an Aries rising. The Lord of Aries is Mars. Mars is in the 11th house of club screw society, and Mars in a nakshatra of Purva, which is symbolized by a cremation pyre. Okay. Fire, flames, destruction, burning things, turning to ash. This, you can see, was a hostile takeover. This is we're not playing nice, we're not trying to coexist, we are taking this for our own at everybody's expense. Okay, so I can understand why people probably want to bury this date, but again, without this event, the rest wouldn't happen, right? So not a pretty time, but and then again, look, Mars, again, all this fighting and fire and violence going on in the groups and, in the 11th house, the cremation pyre, it's aspecting the second house, where you'll get another Mars K2 mashup, like the other chart, all the other charts we've looked at so far for Mars, for Australia. So again, so what do we have here? Saturn is in the Lugna in all three charts, or related to the Lugna. So Saturn was in the first chart aspecting the Lugna. So that's the Federation chart aspecting the Lugna. In the Captain Phillip chart, it ruled the Lugna. In this chart, it's aspecting the Lugna. Now the thing is, in this chart, Saturn is aspecting its debilitation signs. So this is like destructive, like just blowing through, like almost like frankly like scorching the earth type of energy, like really hardcore. Okay, it was like kind of hard to look at this chart, frankly. Venus is combust, so there's no compassion here. It's like we're taking this thing for our own. So we have Saturn basically in the Lugna, or related to the Lugna in all three charts. Venus is either combust or in war. So again, social grace, challenged in all three charts. Planets in Mula, again, planting seeds in all three charts, and that destruction energy. Mars and K2 combinations in all three charts, explosive energy. Like, that's what I'm talking about, Druid karma, fixed karma here. Okay. But in this one, since we're dealing with an Aries rising and Mercury is in Ashwini, the conversation that's going on here is this is like a pioneer energy. And again, this is like the first kind of stake in the ground for any sort of claim that Britain has in Australia. But a lot of destructive energy, lack of diplomacy, compassion, luxuries. I mean, this is like a hardcore situation. A lot of transformation. Sun is in Bharani Nakshatra, the birth of a new authority in the country, and Venus is in Kritika. So, again, a lot of fighting energy going on here. Yeah. And a lot of difficulties as well. Again, this is a hostile energy takeover type of chart. 11th house. K2. Hold on. What did I write here? Aspect. Oh, Mars is aspecting K2. Yeah, in the second house. Yeah. Sound is debilitating Lugna. Also in all three charts. I mean, on the more positive side, sorry, I don't mean to be like so negative, but it was like these charts are pretty intense. In all three charts, there's a Buddha Ditya Yoga, so Mercury and Sun together. Okay, so there's a lot of intelligence. Okay. Also, because Saturn is related to the Lugna, there's endurance and there's a practical type of, again, gestalt physically and mentally for the country. The other thing, it seems kind of funny, well, it literally is funny, is that Mercury and Jupiter are together a lot. In the first chart, they're at war with each other, but they're together. The Federation chart. And then in the Captain Cook chart, right, Mercury was at the top and Jupiter was aspecting. And here again, Mercury's at the top and Jupiter aspecting. Mercury and Jupiter together, again, on the lighter side, they can both be, it's about chit-chatting, talking, speech, that's like jovial, upbeat, that sort of thing. So there's probably, despite these like deep intensities, that keep coming through the church, There's also intelligence, there's practical minded, there's endurance, and then there's also like this sort of chatting and joking around type energy, which the few Australians I've met, they tend to be kind of like that. Like they like to joke around, and also I think there's a big thing with pub culture in Australia. The Australians I met were traveling, they're big travelers. I met them in Europe, um, and they were always like, "Oh, where's the pub?" Like that was their thing, and then they go and whatever, grab a pint and chit chat and that sort of thing. So you can see those things again pretty consistently through all these charts as well. So hopefully it doesn't come across as too negative, but I think just the maybe general vibe, in the air is pointing towards some of the stuff that's more a sticking point for Australia and what they're currently going through and all the challenges currently. Okay, so hopefully that brought some insight. Okay, so there you go. Hopefully some interesting astrology for you related to Australia, historically and also in current day. Um, Again, thanks so much for all your support on my work in the channel. I really appreciate all the ways that you guys do that. Again, all of my teaching videos on the subject of Vedic astrology are my concepts playlist. They can be found there. For more famous birth charts, check out my birth charts archive list 2025 video for a list of most of the famous charts I've analyzed on the channel and the videos you can find them in. Because most of them aren't like one-off videos like this. Like this is clearly an Australia, astrology video. Uh, but like my monthly videos, I usually talk about 3 famous charts, and you'd never know from the title. It just says like January transits, and you'd never know I do famous, I analyze famous charts in those videos as well. Um, I do offer individual birth chart readings, and again, I have that astrology class coming up in a week or so. So if you're interested in that, email me pretty quickly here so we can get your application in. Or again, if you want a birth chart reading with me, you can email heartlight@astrology.com for information on those things. I do have another YouTube channel on natural medicine where I talk about Ayurveda, yoga, and homeopathic and naturopathic medicine. Ayurveda is traditional Indian medicine, so other Vedic arts I cover on that channel. The name of that channel is Nature Source Care, so that's out there too for you. All right. So as always, thanks so much for stopping by. Thanks for your support. I wish you guys all the best. Happy New Year. And I think my next video will be popping up for you in 2026 in a few days. All right, so take good care. And as always, I hope you found this talk helpful, useful, and interesting to you as you learn to navigate the energy cycles of your own life. All right, so until the next one and the next year, namaste.